Welcome to the Burrillville School Committee regular meeting, November 14th, 2017. Burrillville High School Media Center, 425 East Avenue, Harrisville, Rhode Island. Time is 6:15. Members present, all with the exception of Joshua Tessier and Mike Kamajian, who are excused. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Chair, motion to go into executive session under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5. A3, Emergency Operation Plan, and under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5, A1, Personnel.
Second.
Our motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll move into executive session. Ms. Carden? Polling?
Polling.
Yes.
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 We are in executive session. And I will... session. Make a note that there was one vote taken in executive session.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that one vote was to approve the superintendent's recommendation for the salary adjustment for Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. We don't.
Emergency plan.
Oh, on the emergency, and also a vote was taken on the emergency operation plan
No, we
as
didn't.
presented by Dr. Pilata.
Okay, that's all we did. No voting, right?
Right.
Let's move forward. Okay. Next item, 4, recognition. Having none this evening, item 5, consent agenda. Approval of minutes, warrants and invoices, bids.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve the minutes of the October 3rd, 2017 Burrillville School Committee meeting, the regular meeting and the executive meeting, and to approve warrant number 4 for the month of October dated November 14th, 2017 in the amount of $2,944,757.56, and to approve the following bids. To Industrial Burner of Providence, Rhode Island for the Burrillville Middle School boiler feedback system replacement in the amount of $32,890. To Constellation Energy, Boston, Mass. For the electricity procurement in the amount of .07820 price per kilowatt. And to DATCO for student transportation, a 3-year contract awarded to DATCO New Britain, Connecticut in the amount of, I believe it's $6,314,600. $6,314,601.60 for 3 years.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item, presentation by the public to the school committee. We have none this evening. Item 7, public comment. Athletic department policies. We have school committee agenda request form from Christine Hammond. Christine, hi Christine. If you would start, please. Whoever's going to speak, could you please step up to the podium and state your name and address, please?
Christine Hammond, 120 Shore Drive, Pasco.
Okay. What would you like to say?
I don't know what the school committee knows about the situation. Obviously, you've all seen the summary. I'm assuming everybody read it. Okay, so the 2 issues that are a concern for me, I'm going to move this, are the issues about the informational report. I have some questions about what the school's take on that is. That night, you know, as you read, the situation played out, and my son was picked up from that party, and my husband and I addressed those issues at home. He was in the wrong place, should have gotten himself out of the situation sooner, had actually called for someone to come pick him up. And when the police arrived at the party, he realized that was too late. Many kids ran out the windows. Many kids took off on foot. Some had been drinking, some hadn't. My son had not. So his take was, what would be the point of me running? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not trying to hide anything. So I'll have a conversation with the police, and that's the end of it. And we'll see if something comes. I spoke with the police officer that was there. It was pretty clear. I asked Nick if he offered to do a breathalyzer. He said he did. He looked like he was fine, as did many of the kids sitting in the kitchen. I asked the officer if there was going to be anything further, because he asked Nick if there were other kids that had left on foot, or if he could give any names, because, you know, we certainly don't want kids running through the woods. who had been drinking or not drinking. Nick said, not more than the other kids have already kind of named some names. And he said, okay, I said, did you use? Nothing? No, he was fine. So I said, do we have anything further here? He said, nope, you can take him home, that's it. So I said, no further report to do anything? He said, no. Took him home. Heard through the grapevine, I had seen lots of parents there, lots of kids there. Everybody was sort of going through the whose kid did what, who was really there. There's a lot of chatter all weekend, but I said, my husband and I addressed this with my son. And we talked about the responsibility of getting yourself out of there safely, making good choices. As soon as you hear that there's alcohol coming, you see something, you leave. You need to get out of there. So we handled that at home. On Monday, he shows up for school and shows up for soccer practice and is told that he will no longer be needed for the remainder of the season. He and one of the other boys on the soccer team. So I thought, he texted me and said, I'm going to get a ride home. And I said, well, I'm going to have a conversation with the coach, certainly. And he said, yeah. And I said, what was the explanation given? And he said, well, that I was at a party and there was alcohol there and I violated the rules and I can't play for the remainder of the season. I said, well, that's pretty harsh, but especially when you didn't do anything. So he said, well, it is what it is. So I ended up coming to the school shortly thereafter, and I spoke with the coach, and he explained a little bit about how it was wrong place at the wrong time. He realized that, and it was guilty by association was a term that was used. And, relate a lot about the coaching and the responsibility of athletes and taking that seriously and not getting caught in things that involve drugs and alcohol and all of the things that we all know we want coaches to do because these are our kids. I've worked 30 years in social services, DCYF, courthouses. I've got all kinds of job experience with this. We all know what's the best thing to do for the kids in order to keep them safe. Sharing information is an okay thing, but it got a little cloudy for me because the information being relayed to the school about my son, I'm not really sure where that line should be, because in my estimation, he hadn't broken any laws. The police department has the right to release that information to me. I can go to the police department and ask for that information because he's a juvenile. But there were no charges pending. There was no formal report ready at the time I went to the police department, because I did go to the police department to inquire about it. And essentially it became a little bit murky, like, well, we can share information for the purpose of keeping kids safe because that's what we do in these kinds of scenarios. You can tell the coaches, oh, these kids were at this party, and yeah, we all want them to be safe, so that's good on many levels. But on the other hand, if you're going to do that type of informational sharing, I'm not really sure where the line is drawn. Maybe if kids had charges pending, or they were found to be drunk, or had substances on them, or where's the line where the information sharing is legal or not legal? See what I'm saying? We all get it. We want them to be safe. We want to be able to tell the coach, hey, these kids are freshmen, like these kids are sophomore. We don't want them at these parties. But at some point, there's a privacy issue. My husband and I handled it. We spoke to our son about better decisions. And I don't know where that line was crossed to go tell the school about it, because there was nothing, and the message that ended up trickling out of that for my son, and I've always told him, please stay and talk to the police. If you're in a situation you didn't do anything wrong, you have every right to stay and talk to the police. And you should tell them everything you know, and you should be compliant. The message that got real murky for me the next day, or the 2 days later when he's suspended from the team, was, well, I know what I'm going to do next time. I'm going to jump out the window, because I can't trust that the school is not going to overstep and inject themselves in a situation that was a home matter. So now you've got a murky message to teenage kids, who every one of the kids that's involved in this got the same message. It was that between the administration and the police department, you're better off running. because we're gonna carry this over into the school department, and now you're gonna get hit with athletics. And the penalties hit you on the field, where this was an issue that we believe was ours to handle, and we did. So I'd really like to see, at some point, some kind of clarification. I did speak with Officer Boschman. I mean, we talked about it being an informational report. I'd somehow like to see some kind of a definition put down in some kind of book or in writing as to what qualifies as information being shared and for what purpose. If you want to share it to tell the coach, have a conversation with these kids, that's great. But if it's informational reporting, as to what I know it is in the world of social services, informational reporting is for your knowledge only. It is not to be imparting consequences and benching kids. I mean, if you've got kids that you knew, there was a half dozen kids that they pretty much full well knew were only there and really hadn't used any substances. There was no allegations of it. Kids start talking, and this kid did this, and this kid did that, but there was no allegations of a good half dozen kids doing anything. And the school knew that, and the coaches knew that. So they could have easily sat down with them and taught them about making better choices and had a real conversation and used it as more of a learning opportunity than benching them during playoffs and on their senior nights. And that's one issue. That's the first issue.
Okay. Is that the only issue you wish to discuss this evening?
No. Just one more.
Okay.
Once you go past that issue and what's appropriate, I certainly agree that if there were any charges that were, any kids that came out of that with charges, any kids that came out of that where the police knew there were substances used, substances distributed, substances carried, any of that, in all cases, needs to be relayed to the school. There's no question of that. That makes perfect sense for every reason, especially athletes, because the athletes are now on teams and they've all signed substance abuse policy agreements, and they're not going to use, and they're not going to. So all of those things have real violations that they signed in the athletic handbook. The other difficulty that rolled out with this, which is completely preventable in my opinion, is that you had Dr. Whaley, or I believe to be Dr. Whaley, receive the information from the police, give that over to Mr. Abadi, who then said to the coaches, here are these names. If these kids are on your team, impart whatever specific team rules you have in place that these kids have signed. So if the kids, each team I'm sure has their own team rules. If the kids have signed these team rules and it specifically says on there, you will not be at a party where alcohol or, unsupervised with no adult present, if it specifically says that, then I suppose you can impart some sort of penalty. If it doesn't specifically say that, and you start having coaches imparting all sorts of different consequences, with this we had, 5 or 6 kids from football. We had 2 from soccer. We had 1, I think, from field hockey, but their season was over, so that's thrown out. 1 from cross country. All of these coaches handled it completely differently. Cross country opted not to give any penalty, had a really long, serious talk with her player because that was what was going to be effective with her, and that was effective with her. My son ended up with potentially a 4-game penalty, which was, it was over the top, in my opinion, for a kid that was pretty knowingly didn't do anything, was just there. Some of the football ones were all over the place. I don't have them all off the top of my head, but I know that there were 2-game penalties, 1-game penalties, no penalties, and ask anyone in the room how much discord that caused among kids. Why didn't you get, how come you've got 1 game, you've got 2? What does that mean? Why is this happening? Parents were upset, coaches are upset, everybody was upset by that. So that becomes an issue. Like somewhere this athletic policy has to be better addressed, and it has to be clearer, because there have been some pretty glaring inconsistencies over the years as well, and none of them are secrets. There's been some, issues related to other behaviors, and then it's also time to kind of discuss Why is it just extracurriculars, including athletics? Why is that? Why is it not reaching out to student council? If you were at the party, if you're a student council member, then you're also being held at a certain standard, I would think. So why the athletes and not the student council member? Why not the band kid? Why are you not benched from playing at the next football game? And why aren't you not allowed to participate in a certain student council thing? And if you're a class officer, well, you're probably in a lot of trouble. Extracurriculars are all a gift to them. They get to participate. And I think it all needs to be, I think some kind of committee needs to be formed to figure out how you're going to go forward with this. Because there's really no guidelines. I looked through Ryle, I called Ryle, I spoke with people there. They said code of conduct is not something we just impart on schools. Schools kind of start dipping into those areas, but they said our guidelines are if you are on the field, traveling to a game, representing your school, those are the times we discuss behavior, but we really don't even trickle into behavior on the street. That's not our area. So if schools want to, and I'm not sure they'd really want, I don't know why they'd want to, it's something that has to be looked at. And I'm willing to be a parent volunteer to be on that committee to help work with the coaches, because regardless of what anybody thinks about why I'm here or why I'm doing this, it's all for the kids. I mean, we can only make it better. And I would think that, I could have a coach annoyed with me right now. I could have Dave annoyed with me. I could have anybody annoyed with me right now for doing this. But the point is we want to make it the best system that you can make it. And if the coaches are all on the same page and they're being told, okay, this penalty is equating with you're benched 1 game, you do this, you're benched 2 games, then it's easier for everybody. It's easier for every single coach going forward. It just makes it easier for everyone, because when it's easier for the kids and the coaches, it's easier for the parents. So all of that stops, all that discord stops when there's a party. And there was a discussion about, we're going to work on this for next year, for next year's athletic handbook, and that's not really okay, because kids are going to play in the winter sports and they're going to play in the spring sports, and parties still happen. Parties happen every weekend in this town. And kids are always going to be there. And you can't really control, if you're a kid that's at a party and people show up with booze, what are you going to run for the door? It happens, and they need to be able to learn to make good choices. And maybe you can actually be the kid that's at the party and not make a bad choice. Maybe you can be that kid. And they're going to leave us in 3 years and be in colleges and have to make these choices. So I don't want to make it murkier for my son by sending mixed messages about what the right thing to do. Dealing with the police appropriately is the right thing to do. The school imparting their stuff when it's really not their purview is kind of an issue for me.
Well, thank you very much for being a concerned parent. Appreciate that. Are there any questions from the school committee members for Ms. Hammond?
I just want to make a clarification.
Mm-hmm.
In the student handbook, there is a policy, and there is language, I'll read it word for word, about the off-campus behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It says students may be disciplined for off-campus behavior when it causes or is likely to cause a substantial disturbance at the school, or when it creates a threat of danger at the school, or if there is a connection between the school and the off-campus behavior. So you could likely have a situation where the police get involved 11 o'clock on a Sunday night at a party, and there's weapons there and there's substance abuse there, and kids are running into the woods, and those kids show up in school the next day. If the police doesn't communicate that to the school,
Mm-hmm.
the school will have no idea that
Right.
there could be a potential dangerous situation taking place. So there is language just to clarify the off-campus behavior. It's not just on the
Mm-hmm.
school-directed events.
And what I did mention to you previously is that the only circumstance where information for a child not being charged can be relayed to the school, and I did say that, is when there's threat of violence or there is some type of physical threat that happens. So if you know, if you're a police department and you know there's some question of violence or some question of threat with my son, then yes, by all means tell that's the circumstance that is allowed in juvenile law for you to relay that information immediately to the school. But if there's no violence and there's no threat being given by the kids, it's a pretty fine line as to when that information is appropriate to give and when it isn't.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a threat. I mean, it could be alcohol, it could be substance abuse, no threat involved. It's a very difficult issue. I'll agree with you on that. And past practice has always been, because we work so closely with the police department, which we have avoided many situations in school because of events that have happened on the weekend. When we get noticed, at least the school is prepared to deal with the situation. I applaud you for dealing with your son in the way that you dealt with your son. Sometimes that doesn't always happen.
I appreciate that.
And somebody has to end up dealing with it, whether it's the counselor, or the school principal, the vice principal, or even a coach. And the other thing is, I would tend to come to middle ground on whether or not all the consequences should be different for all the teams in terms of the coaches and the type of consequence that they impose. You indicated that they have different consequences.
All of them.
So there's maybe a lack of inconsistency there. I don't know the reason for that. Anybody who wants to speak to that who knows better than I, they're certainly welcome to come to the podium and speak about that. But, you know, that would certainly be one area I'd be willing to try to draw some compromise on. But I think in terms of the relationship with the off-campus behavior, that has worked well for many, many years in the district, more often than not. And it's really prevented a lot of situations. And what has really helped us is Officer Boschman, and him being a resource officer at the school. Sometimes the off-campus activity, he's there, so he relates that information to the school, and the school will invoke the discipline policy. And in the policy of substance abuse, there's a first offense, second offense, third offense, and it's all kind of spelled out. So I'm okay with that information being relayed. You may not agree with that, but I think it's really important that that information gets transferred to the school. I think the police certainly have to use discretion in terms of what they're going to relate based on somebody being charged and not being charged, and they certainly can speak to that. I'm not going to dive into their area.
Oh, a second, Dave, please. Christine, would you let Dave take the podium, please? So he
Sure.
can speak? Thank you.
Because of the conversation we had, it went back to the chief just to get some clarification on that. And his exact quote to me was at the time is the police department is not going to put its head in the sand when it comes to underage drinking. So as far as underage information we get at a party, that will always be transferred to the school department, and they will do whatever they see fit at that point. As far as what you made a statement, as far as if they haven't done anything wrong versus they've done something wrong, if they are charged, we cannot release the information. So it's just the opposite of what you said. If they're being charged, we can't release any juvenile information. If they haven't been charged, we have the right to forward that information to them as an information report, and then the school can do as they see fit with it. And the other thing I kind of took offense to was when you said, my son, the next time he learned from this lesson was that if there's going to be another party, next time he'll just run. Well, my answer to him would be, there won't be a next time. You're not going to be at one of those parties, and there are going to be consequences if you do. You know, I understand this, you know, you want to educate your kid, but this is an underage drinking party. It's illegal for them to be there. So whether or not, you know, the school disciplines them, I agree with you, and I've discussed that with you. I think it should be more across the board as far as the discipline, as far as with the coaches. There should be some kind of policy where I think it's across the board. That's my opinion. But as far as with the police department is concerned, we will always relay that information to the school department and let them do what they see fit. And as far as, like I said again, as far as if there are charges, then at that point, because they're juveniles, we can't release that information. So I don't know if that helped clarifies a couple of things for you. No. But that's the way it was explained to me. And like I said, and the chief says he has no problem, and he will continue passing that information on to the school department. If you want to have a conversation with the chief, you're more than welcome to give him a call. But like I said, I had that conversation after having that with you, just to make sure everybody was on the same page. And he told me at the time, no, the police department will not put their heads in the sand when it comes to underage drinking. Plus, there was marijuana at that party on top of it. So he felt very strongly that the information should be passed on to the school department and let them see fit what they're going to do with it. So I don't know if that helped you out or not. But I just wanted, from the police department's point of view, we're always going to pass. We've been SRO for 12 years, and we've always passed that information on to the school department. And they do, like again, they do what they see fit at that point. Okay.
Thank you, Officer Boschman. Would it be possible, the athletic director, John, do you have anything that you can enlighten us with this on? Would appreciate it.
I'm not going to repeat what a lot of people have already mentioned, but the bottom line is to make sure that our athletes and our students in general remain safe. We want them to make the right decision. We want them to be proactive in what they do when they're growing up, but we want to make sure that we instill in them the right decision. Now, I heard that you have a lengthy background. I spent 30 years at the Rhode Island Training School. I've seen kids from real good families get sent to the training school. And when you start talking to the kids and you ask, why is it that you're here? I'm here because I was in the company of some kids who were doing things illegally. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't drink at the party. I didn't steal the car. I didn't have the gun. I had nothing wrong. I just happened to be there. That's a poor choice. That's a poor decision. That's what we feel that these young people made that night. Now, I am in total agreement with changing handbooks. It's a guide. There could be something going on right now in the community that's going to warrant somebody picking this up tomorrow and saying, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, or you did this and you did that, and there might be another change to the handbook tomorrow. We've made several changes to the handbook over the past few years from parents who have brought suggestions to us regarding certain circumstances that have arisen, and we've made that policy. We've made that change, excuse me. I'm looking right now at high schools within our area and high schools within our divisions. I want to see what their handbooks have to say regarding off-campus drinking, just being there, not having the bottle in your hand or not having consumed any, but being there. And they all address it the way we addressed it. The way we did it last week, they addressed it that the kids should not be at those parties, and they do leave it up to coaches with guidelines to make the determination what's going to happen to the student. Now, I think that there's a few more that I'm waiting on, and I'd like to take bits and pieces from every one of them and put them together, and perhaps, well, not perhaps, but add it to our handbook. And there's one other thing that's in our handbook already that I didn't see in any of the other handbooks, and that is that there's the right to appeal. If you don't like a decision that a coach makes regarding your child, you can appeal that decision to the athletic director. You can appeal that decision to the principal. I didn't have anybody come to me and ask for an appeal. I'm not sure if anybody went directly to Mr. Whaley and asked for an appeal. But had they, we would have sat down and gone over the cases. Might it have changed some? Possible. Might it not have changed? Possible. Depends on what the conversation was that we were having. The one thing this has done, and I think it's great, it's making kids think twice. It's making kids think twice about going to that next party. And if we're successful in that, then shoot me down, call me anything you want, I'll accept that. If we're making kids think twice, then there's something right about our policy. If we can get them to think twice, we've done something positive. We have definitely done something positive. And days after this happened, the conversations in the school were all about this. We're all about this. Good and bad. Good and bad. But it was conversation. It was conversation about this. Had some real good conversation with a lot of different kids on it. Kids who didn't understand it. It was extremely interesting. It was extremely educational. And I was thrilled to see kids talking about it. If they're talking about it, then something hit home. Something registered. I put something out to the coaches last week, how they felt about one set of rules right across the board, one set of disciplines right across the board for every team. They were not in favor of it. Some were, most of them were not. Most of them were not. They favored, yes, and this is what we do. I sent out a template to every coach that we have, and I tell that coach, you can use these rules word by word if you want. If you want to change anything or if you want to add anything because you don't think some of the school policies are strong enough, feel free to do so, but I've got to see it before it goes out to the parents. And there are several coaches who have put things in there. And there's other coaches who say, no, I'm okay with what's here. I'm okay with what's in the substance abuse policy. I'm okay with what's in the code of conduct. I'm okay. I think we're covered in all those areas. And as for the discipline being doled out for each team, they felt that the dynamics of each team are so different that to have one blanket coverage wouldn't be doing the kids any good service. So they felt that they needed the discretion with our approval to let them know, to let us know what it is that they plan on doing. And again, that's where, in this case, an appeal process would have been effective. Had a kid come to me and formally appeal, I don't know, maybe we wouldn't be here right now. And I do wish that, you know, we always look for the bad when we read a guideline. If we're reading the handbook, something happened. Something happened, and I want to find out where the school went wrong. I want to find out where the school went wrong, so let's go through this. And that's good. That's good. It's a learning process for all of us. It's a definite learning process for all of us. But sometime when you have the time, go through the handbook good. There's some really good things in here to keep kids safe. Some really good things. And, you know, I want to emphasize on that. I'd like to say that there are some really good things in this handbook that's good for the teams, that's good for the coaches, and the bottom line is it's good for the kids. So I think if we had looked at that good, and if everybody had seen the appeal process, I don't know if we would be here this evening if the appeal process was adhered to. I can't say for sure, but I think if the appeal process were followed, I think it would have made a difference. But it wasn't, and here we are this evening. But again, the handbook is a guideline. We are going to make some changes. We are going to either add, subtract, or delete some of it. There will be changes made to it, and that's a good thing. I have no problem with change. I think change is good. And until the next crisis comes up, hopefully that will resolve this. I don't want to say crisis. I think we bit the bullet. We bit the bullet on this one. We bit the bullet. I think there was a lot of alcohol. I think there were a lot of things there that night. If you look at the death rates this year in the state of Rhode Island, traffic death rates, I think we're double or triple what we were last year. So had that party gone on any longer, and kids who were there who weren't drinking got into a car with somebody who was drinking, we were lucky. We bit the bullet on this one. Nobody got hurt. We're hoping that everybody got home safe. We're pretty sure that everybody got home safe, but we bit the bullet on this one. And if there's any community that should know about the dangers of drinking and driving and death resulting, it's Burrillville. Take a look at the rink. Look at those numbers that are hanging up on the rafters in the rink. Those are kids who are drinking and driving. Those are kids who are in vehicles who may not have even been drinking. but they were in a vehicle. If we can get kids to think twice and make the decision to remove themselves, they got there somehow. They can get out somehow. If we can get kids to think twice about putting themselves in those situations, we're going to be a pretty safe community. And, you know, sometimes the best discipline is the one that hits home. And for an athlete, taking away playing time, that hurts. Man, that hurts. I practice hard all week, and to have playing time taken away hurts. It really does hurt, and I felt bad for the kids who missed games. But we did it. We did it with the right intention, and that was to make sure that they remain safe. So I don't know if anybody is.
Is that okay, Mr. Chair? So I know the district handbook for athletics and the policies, those are all required to be signed by both families and athletes at the substance abuse meeting at the start of the year. Are team rules just sent home? Are some collected with signatures, or are all coaches required to send them home, get a signature, and then have them returned to them?
They can do it several ways. They can send it home, but they should be having team meetings before the start of the season where the rules are handed out. And yes, the parents sign. They're supposed to be signing for the rules. Now, signing the rules, it doesn't mean the parent has read every single rule. It doesn't mean the parent has read every single article in the handbook. The signature simply means that they received it.
And I agree with you, but I think from the school department, if our coaches are sending them home and we're receiving a signature, then in our minds, our parents have looked over them and they've approved of those rules. So
I'd like to think that, but I can't say that.
That's my perspective. So as long as, if the rules are different for every team, as long as those parents have read those specific rules for their team, then if they have questions, that's when I think they come to you or Dr. Whaley or the coach themselves. So I'm just wondering if every coach requires a signature, because I think that's important in this situation.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. Boddy?
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say in this regard? Dr. Whaley?
Good evening. So I think in really thinking about this process, I don't have any issue with looking at rules and having a committee and having parents be a part of that process. I think that's a good thing. You know, I was just thinking about the student handbook and the dress code. 5 or 6 years ago, we were going crazy about yoga pants. And then we realized that every teenage girl was wearing yoga pants, and we couldn't legitimately address that. So that's something that we addressed and we changed. And so situations come into play, you look at these things. I feel very strongly that the current policies that we have in place, we followed, and coaches followed them. But we can look at it. We're not perfect, and this is a good opportunity to look at the entire substance abuse policy. And I think the question for the committee is, do you want the schools handling these types of situations where students are attending a party outside of school and being in the presence of alcohol and drugs? I would be an advocate that we should, that most schools have some sort or form of policy, but I think that's your decision. And then we go from there, and then we form the committee. I'd also say we have a townwide task force, the Burrillville Prevention Action Coalition, and you know, I think if we're going to really seriously look at these policies, we should be inclusive of them as well. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak this evening in this matter? Sylvia.
Years ago when I was in high school, we were at a party and one of my girlfriends had been drinking and left and was killed in a car accident. And we still, my friends and I, still feel responsible for that. And we know that underage drinking is illegal and it's extremely unsafe. So I want you to feel that. I want you to understand that if anything would have happened to anyone in that party and have left and got in an accident, what would your son be like? I also have a daughter who liked to press the rules, if you want to say it like that. She went to college, and she was 21, and she was at a party, and there was underage drinking there. Because there was underage drinking and because she was at the party, who actually didn't drink at the party, she was put on probation from the college for I don't know how long, maybe a few months. And I thought, good, that's a good thing, because what if one of those underage drinkers would have been killed or would have died at that party? I know it didn't happen again with her. She never went to a party where there was underage drinking. So I think you have to look at a lot of different things, and I think we need to look at why underage drinking is illegal and what the ramifications of that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Lesson learned, right? Well, I think the school committee strives to incorporate best practices into our decision-making, and that whatever's going to ensure best results. It'd be my recommendation that we refer the matter to the superintendent and have him work with the coaches, the principals.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. There's someone who would like to speak.
Oh, didn't see that. Snuck around on me.
I know. Got to say my name?
Yes, and address.
Courtney Lacey, 105 Town Farm Road. So I'm a coach. And I think that this situation, I know Mr. Body said that it makes kids think. I have a 17-year-old kid, he plays on the football team here. And we came back from our cruise, and he said he was afraid to go. Apparently there was another party, and he was afraid, the football team, they wanted nothing to do with that party. So it's definitely making kids think. As a coach, it would be really helpful if we got together with Dr. Whaley, Mr. Body, parents, and did, form the committee, and we were all on the same page, because I think it's really difficult as a coach, for me to be like, well, you're gonna be benched 4 games, and then that kid sees, a basketball player being benched for 1 game for doing the same thing, and I think it's not fair to the kids, all the kids, and I know I want to look out for my girls, but at this, it's all of the Burrillville High School athletes, and it would be really helpful if we could form some kind of committee and all got together moving forward, and everything across the board was the same, because I don't think it's right that some kids get 4 games, one kid gets 1 game. I think that's really unfair. My opinion, I've been here coaching here for a long time. This is unfortunate that it happened, but I think it would, moving forward, I think she's right that I think we should really get together, form a committee, and everything should be across the board and fair for all the kids. So, that's my opinion.
Point well taken.
All set?
Yes,
Thank you.
I have to watch those.
I do too.
Very quickly, I'm Janet Mcclendon, and I'm the student assistance counselor here. I've been in prevention for over 30 years, and I just want to support what she said. We know that good policy makes good prevention, and being consistent is one of the things, if you look at any of the research, that really impacts the culture of a team and the teams, the athletics across the board. So I agree with the idea that we have at least a minimum consequence that applies to all teams, and maybe extracurriculars as well. That's been brought up. That being said, I would be happy to participate in consulting on a new policy.
All right, thank you. Before I say another word, I'm going to ask anybody else like to have something to say in this matter. Hearing none,
Sorry. I agree with both Janet and Courtney, and I love what Dr. Whaley shared in terms of BPAC. I think we have that resource and we have that committee already formed, and if we can bring in more parents and more community members to collaborate and work together, I'd be more than happy to somehow bring in parents and concerned citizens to BPAC. I don't mind managing that or having a helping hand in that. I agree. I think one policy somehow, or one set of rules and guidelines would be easier for both administration and coaches. So that's my last 2 cents.
thank you.
Maybe.
You can spend more if you'd like.
Maybe, we'll see.
I'd first like to thank everybody for coming, because that what you did was fantastic. I think bringing this to light, and you'd like to speak too, and I appreciate hearing your testimony first, because I'd like to piggyback.
Testimony? Did I do something wrong here?
No, that's feel free. Speak at ease. No.
Hi, my name's Dave Prario, 198 Lynn Lane, Mapleville. I also happen to be an assistant coach for a couple of sports here too, so I have a different perspective. I'm also a parent of one of the kids who had been involved with the party. But I'd like to say first, I mean, I know the police officers and stuff that they have here is probably one of the best things that the school has ever done. I mean, my family and my kids consider Officer Boschman to actually be like a friend and a mentor. He's the kind of guy who goes to your kids' sporting events, away games as well. He actually listens to all the kids. He has a good finger on the pulse of what's going on with everything. And it's very supportive for the athletes. Now, in terms of what Mr. Abadi had said, I agree with him that we should have it be varied, the punishments, for some of the individual sports teams, but not when it comes to the policies that are being looked at outside of the school grounds. Like, I believe that for coaches, say you want to handle something differently for a kid missing a practice, that should still be allowed to be varied by the coaches. However, something that is going to be looked at, which you're judging them based on the school, if you're judging them because they're representing the school or the school's policies, that has to be uniform. And I don't think that can be wavered on. You know, you have to have uniformity with that, and then, you know, with the other individual policies, then you can go ahead and vary that somewhat. And I do think that we can't wait any longer to go ahead and have a policy change for next year. That's something that has to be done now and should be in place. Even if it's halfway through the season, you put it in. If a kid wants to participate, they sign up. They sign up for that form, otherwise they don't participate any longer. And one thing I'd like you to consider when you're doing this, look at some of these other kids. I know we heard about the statistics for the drunk driving and whatnot going up, and I fully agree with John on that. However, we have to also consider, we had kids there who went to this party. Someone had called them and said that they had been drinking. So this kid showed up. They were standing at the party, and then they noticed another one of their friends had been drinking a little too much. They stayed to offer that kid a ride home, and that child was suspended from her team. So, I mean, there's kind of a tough line of demarcation you can have there, where you have to go and make sure that you're considering some of these, extraneous factors as well. Just because a kid happened to be there, I know it's all well and good to say, oh, the kid should have gotten out of there. But you know what? What if you left a friend there, and God forbid you had sexual abuse happen to somebody, or someone's intoxicated and they go and can't get themselves out. I mean, there's a fine line between turning tail and running and doing the right thing. I mean, I'm never going to be naive enough to pretend that any of my kids, are going to do no wrong. But my wife and I have done a good job raising them, and part of the reason is you put them in these situations where you hope they can go ahead and learn to do the right thing. Part of that, sometimes it might be attending and getting right out the second you know something is wrong. But sometimes it's also looking and seeing how to handle yourself in that situation, how to do the right thing. You don't have to be there for 3 hours and say, oh, I got stuck in the wrong place. But what if you're there for 10 or 15 minutes and you don't want to be the kid who walks in, turns around and leaves? Then the police show up and people think that you're the one who ratted on them. I would just hope that we could consider that and maybe look to see some of the good that we see in some of that. Because, I mean, ironically, my daughter was nominated for VASA like the week before. So her coach was ready to kill her when she found out she was at this party. But there are also times where you can think, where does the line get drawn for what these kids can do? Like, how do you know when someone is looking at everything you're doing? It's not the worst thing in the world. Like, what if these kids are at a party at first, and there's no alcohol that you know of that's there? So you have like 40 kids there. And then eventually, as parties always do, you attract more people, and people start trickling in. At what point is it incumbent upon those kids to get up and have to leave because 5 kids are drinking beers in the corner? You know, it gets kind of tough. So I just hope that we can consider that as we're going in and creating this policy. You know, I just want to, I'd hate to see people too often throw a blanket over everybody and end up punishing innocent people because they don't know how to properly deal with the guilty ones. You know, and I'm not at all a proponent of my kids going out drinking. If they get caught drinking and that's something that's in a policy, slam them with whatever punishment you have, because it'll be worse when they get home, I guarantee you that. But it's just something I can just hope that we can consider as we're doing, and I hope we approach this with some urgency so it doesn't happen to some other kid. And obviously you don't want the other situations where drunk driving or something else can happen too. But
Thank you.
Thank you.
all set. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a motion?
Anyone else from the public wishing to speak at this time? 3 times, I'm not doing it again. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak this evening? Hearing none. Any other committee members or something? Ms. Carden? Done. Okay. Ms. Carden?
Very, very difficult situation when it comes to your children. You'll love them dearly. However, when they become young adults in high school, that's what they are, young adults. And unfortunately, 99.9% of them think they know everything. And parents will never find out, but they do. Yes, we want our children to be safe. They do go out and party. And sometimes, yes, there is no liquor, no drugs, and it's a great party, and someone comes in with liquor. This party, everyone got home safely. As we all know by the crosses we see on the side of the road, such as the one up on Stair Farm Road, where 6 students died. This party, they all got home safely. That's what we want. And I think when you look at what happens with the policies that we have, it's because of the past. We are trying to keep our students safe, help them realize that being a young adult and going to parties has responsibilities. Parents are trying to instill that in them. We are trying to instill that in them. And with us working together, I think that we can come to an agreement on how we handle it. I know that we have counselors in school who try to help some of these students. Parents are working very hard to help our students, and so are we. So together, we want to keep our students, our young adult students, safe. And I think that's where we all are tonight. We all want to be there, keeping our students, our young adults, safe. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other discussion? Mr. Allen.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we explore as quickly as possible the opportunity to set up a meeting with concerned parents, someone from the administration, athletic department, maybe someone from the police department, in conjunction with the organization that we have is a BPAC. If that's not too cumbersome a motion, I'd like to make a motion that we pursue a meeting that includes those parties as soon as possible, put a committee together to look into that.
A motion on the floor?
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion? Mr. Bellato?
Yeah, I need a little more specificity. We're not gonna rewrite the policy, the whole athletic policy. You know, the policy or the book is a guide. And I think every time you have a situation, you have to be careful that you don't change everything because of one situation that occurs, specific to one individual. I think, you know, policies are strong when they're maintained over a period of years. You're shaking your head. You may not agree. But I'm going to give you another example. I was a superintendent in a district 20 years ago. 4 girls were suspended from school for drinking. One parent came to me and said, well, my daughter took a sip and spit it out. Why should she be penalized the same as somebody else who drank a half a liter of vodka? Another parent said to me, my daughter only had that much, so why should my daughter be disciplined the same as the girl who drank the whole bottle of vodka? Each of those parents came in to defend their children because they were all scholarship kids to college, and that was their concern. I met with all those girls individually. Every single one of them owned up that they made a mistake, and they were willing to take the consequences for their mistake. The policy at the time was that you would be suspended for 90 days from all social activities. So that took in at the time the prom and graduation. The important thing that was mentioned tonight was the appeal process. No one took advantage of the appeal process. Those parents came to me to try to justify why those girls should not be disciplined, should go to the prom, and should walk across the stage. I did not allow those girls to go to the prom, but I allowed them to cross the stage because they needed to own up to the consequence and the action that they committed. The reason I was lenient on them was because they came to me and owned up to it, and they were willing to take the consequences associated with it. I'm not sure when any of the boys happened, what happened here. I don't know if any of the boys said they're willing to own up to the situation or not own up to the situation. I don't know who they spoke to, who they didn't speak to. But if they took advantage of the appeal process, reasonable people would have made reasonable decisions. If they came forward and said I had nothing to do with it, and that was validated by somebody at the party, that decision may have been overruled at some point in the process. But when you want to make the motion, I mean, we're gonna take a look at the whole policy and changing the whole policy, or are we going to take a look at the specificity that Mrs. Hammond brought up tonight in terms of the unequal consequences imposed by the coaches? And I think I said in the beginning I was willing to compromise on that. I think, but even that raises questions because you could be a first offender and you could be a third offender. So do you get applied the same? It doesn't, so you got to be careful with all that. And, you know, the language does speak to first, second, and third offenses. I think the point I'm trying to make is that when you look at a policy and it provides guidelines, that's all it provides is guidelines. And you're never going to address every situation. Every situation will be different. And it's not going to be in the policy. Every situation is not going to be covered in a policy. That's what an appeal process is for.
Can I speak one more time when you're done?
So, your motion is to,
I
what
think
specifically?
we're looking to address, I think, specific issues. Consistency of discipline, I think, is important. The role of the school in relaying information from off-campus activities, I think, is a part of that. But I think we've got the police's position on this, if I understand correctly, that they're going to provide that information to the school, and I still don't know if I'm comfortable with that statement. So I would look for clarification on that. Doesn't mean a committee has to be part of that process, but I would be interested in knowing how it goes from a legal situation where someone is criminally charged and therefore the parents' rights trump everything else. But until that happens, then it's less clear to me. So now you're compromising individuals' privacy issues, in my opinion. So I'd like to touch on those things. I don't know if a committee needs to be involved with that aspect as well. Maybe we take some of the low-hanging fruit at the very least and deal with the consistency of discipline. I think is probably an easy one. But Christine has brought up some fantastic points. The points that are in her memo, I think, highlight what is important in this matter. And I think as a guideline, we could start there. But, you know, legal counsel could certainly chime in, and someone from administration can chime in as far as policy points. But we need to have this conversation because there's way too many gray areas, in my opinion. And it's an urgent matter, in my opinion, as well. So.
Let's expand the discussion a little more among committee members.
Sure.
Alex?
I have 2 comments. Sorry. I know I said I wouldn't speak again,
Don't
but
apologize. We want to
broke
hear
that
from you.
promise. So my first comment is if Officer Boschman doesn't mind if I put him on the spot. Sorry, Officer Boschman. So I think in terms of if every single situation off campus is reported to the school and there's no exceptions, if every single thing illegal that happens off campus is reported to administration, I think that's fair. I don't think it's, if we were to say, oh, well, for this party, we're gonna tell the school, but for the party next Saturday, we're not gonna report that to the school, then I think there's some discrepancy and some problems. But I feel like if all information is being relayed from the police department, who we have such great rapport and such a great professional relationship with, is being relayed to us, then I think there's no question in that. If Dr. Pilata is comfortable with that and that's the police department's main priority, then I think I'm comfortable with that. So that's my one, if that makes sense, my one comment on that. No? Number 2, I don't think we should look at the policy. I'm more concerned with consistency among individual team rules. So I think if we're all going to come together through BPAC as one collaborative subcommittee, I think that's where we should be looking, not at the policy or the consequences that's laid out there, but individual teams. I think that's where the consistency needs to be written out. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Rather than the whole district athletic policy, I think it needs to be individual team rules where they all need to be either look the same or reflect the same message, and not put it on the backs of someone like Courtney to decide, oh, well, 4 games versus 2.
I understand. So,
Okay, I agree with your second statement. Then you talked about just making it the discipline policy as far as what happens. The other thing is, if there's a problem, this party reflects on the school. If you look at what happened in North Kingston a few years ago, that was a bunch of kids drinking at a party, and it did reflect, and a couple of kids I think were in a car accident. I'm not sure if there was death, but it did reflect on the school of North Kingston. So I think anything that happens within the town, and there's a lot of talk about it, it will reflect on the school system, especially if it happens with high school kids. And I think this was, and for North Kingston, it was all over the papers. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Look at the I'm sorry. I mean,
you done or you're?
Done.
Okay.
The whole Dropbox incident, home situation. Well, look what happened in school. The chaos it created in school amongst kids, and the media getting involved. I mean, that was a very public situation, but it was done privately. And, what's that?
Dr. Pilata? No, Dr. Pilata, you done with your comments?
I agree with the consistency of the consequences. I think the coaches need guidelines with that. But I want to be very clear that when a committee is formed, that they know exactly what the task is. And they're just not going to go in there and rewrite something that's been in place for a long time and has worked for a long time. I've been here 9 years and never had a situation. But situations do come up, and new situations, and I'm reasonable, I'm okay with all that. But the committee that you're recommending needs to have clarity in terms of what the charge is. So if the charge is notifications, and the language that's currently in there stays, that police notify the school, that language is already in there, and a committee wants to change that language, you're going to have a problem with that. Because who's going to make that decision? Who's going to make that call? Number one. Number two is the consistency of the consequences imposed by coaches. I think the coaches need some clarity with that, although, if I'm not mistaken, I did hear John say that you took a survey of the coaches and most of the coaches disagree with that they would rather have their own imposed consequences. Is that correct? Okay, so you know, we're going to have to come up with some compromise language regarding that, which I'm agreeable to. So those are the two issues that we're talking about? Okay, so I have clarity on it.
Okay. Yeah. So, any further discussion?
One more. I think we also have to always, always, always keep in mind that whatever consequence it is, it's going to stop the behavior. Always keep in mind that.
I think that the policies that we use right now are created through fatalities through the years. I mean, coaches not only want their student athletes to be good athletes, but they want them to live and make good decisions. And even though decision might be difficult and it might be, let's face it, you know, being in the wrong place at the wrong time it's something we all have to deal with. You have to learn how to not put yourself in the positions like that. So I think that one thing we have over other communities is the appeal process. The appeal process allows for the indifferent decision from what the coaches have put out. It really makes a big decision. And it allows for the parents to go to a particular coach and explain, as you did, Ms. Hammond, and maybe for that coach to come across with a different point of view and maybe not be so harsh. I think we have a policy that needs some tweaking, but not rewriting. It is my experience that the more people you put on a committee or a subcommittee and the more emotion that you have involved, the more difficult. That'll make it much slower, not faster. We can get it done, I think, much faster, what we want to accomplish, the two issues that Donison talked about and what we're all talking about. The coaches, the athletic director, the administrators hear you loud and clear. We hear you loud and clear. We all want the same thing. We want consistency in the discipline, for the most part. The appeal process puts us above other communities. It's a great tool. So, for me, I think I would recommend that it go to the superintendent, coaches, the principals, the athletic director. They know what their task is. They get together. They can do something really fast. They can make changes really fast. I think it works the way it is now. It needs some tweaking. That would be my recommendation. Public comments done. So we're not going to have any more public comment, but I will take administrative comments if there's any. Mr. Can you please come back to the
Thank you for allowing me up here again. I do want to thank you for keeping the committee small. A smaller committee will get more done in a quicker time than a larger committee. It would take a much longer time. And the final thing I want to say is discipline is tough. Discipline's a tough thing to do. It's a necessary thing, But discipline is a great thing when it's not your kid. So I think we have to consider that when we're doling out policies that speak to discipline as well. Because this could be an entirely different group of parents in here tomorrow night, and their child was getting corrected, so to speak. So discipline is great, discipline is tough, discipline is wonderful when it's not my child. So, thank you.
Yeah, please.
Sergeant William Lacey. This issue is very personal to me. I don't know if you're aware. Not only am I a sergeant with the police department, as of Monday I'll be promoted to lieutenant. I'll be working on the BPAC committee. I'll be assigned to that, so I'll be involved with that. In the springtime, when I get out of work at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, I take my uniform off. I put my coaching shirt on, and I coach a sport in the spring with the softball team. I also, as a town resident, family members who were personally involved with the tragedy in 1982. There's a scholarship. I'm not sure if your son's a senior. He's going to be applying possibly for a scholarship for that. That's in the memory of these 6 individuals that were killed. As someone who also works nights, it's not a fun call. It's not a fun response when I'm going to an accident. Am I going to show up, and are they going to be possibly members of my softball team that I'm going to have to pull out of a motor vehicle, or I'm going to have to go make a notification to their parent? We do it again, as it's been reiterated. We do this for the safety of the kids. I'll address committee members Allen's concerns on that. I spoke with Colonel Lynch for about a half an hour before the meeting. I came into work and we talked, and it's still going to be the Borough Police Department's policy that we will be in touch with the school. We will give any information to the school that's going to concern the safety of not only the school, but also the safety of the children. Yes, there are some legal issues. Those issues are going to have to be spoken to. They're going to have to be talking. If that's legal counsel that we need, then that can be determined at a later date with the address of the committee that's going to be formed. But again, and as I'll reiterate what Officer Boschman says, he doesn't want the Borough Police Department to really dig its head in the sand on this. He wants to be, proactive, so we don't have situations that run up. And that was the first thing that I was thinking of, and Mr. Abadi came up and he talked about that. Was the, I was a hockey player for Burrillville, and that's one of the things that you see when you're playing, is you're looking up and you're seeing all those numbers of those players that are up there. I was a recipient of the class of '82 scholarship award. I was also the recipient in 1996 of the Mark Bernard Memorial Trophy, who was killed in that car accident. So I do have some personal connection with this issue. But just again, just to address that, we will continue, and we will sit down, we will work to iron out any legal issues that are in place. But as of this point, we're still going to continue to be proactive in this area.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I can be available after too if you want to talk also.
So I want to make this quick. I have a real good idea of what needs to happen. I understand the urgency. I've worked with Mrs. Hammond on things before, and I believe our last conversation, I said, most of our conversations are very reasonable. I have a good idea of a committee to move forward, and I think it's important to include parents. We can get representation from coaches. I have a pretty good structure in my head, and I'd also say I think our winter sports season starts next week. I think until we have some consequences in place, we can. I'm uncomfortable at this point putting coaches in that position. you know, I think we need to protect coaches in saying that we're going to have a policy, we're going to have uniform consequences for this type of behavior, and that'll cover them and cover us in terms of these situations moving forward. I think individual team rules in terms of, you know, if a student athlete misses practices, a coach can certainly handle that, but for the bigger discipline issues, we typically have those things very defined. And in this case, it was undefined, and fortunately, we're here at this process, and that's what we do. We review these things. So, you know, I also think we should probably include representation from the middle school, because unfortunately we do have students at the middle school who engage in some of these activities. So I think I would be hopeful that we can move forward, that I can put something together fairly quickly and have something for you for the next meeting. That would be my goal.
Thank you. Just, Mr. Body, can I clarify that you said earlier that the coaches, majority of the coaches wanted to retain their autonomy in doling out discipline?
Yes. Of the coaches that responded to me,
Right.
the majority of them felt that they didn't want to give that portion of it up.
Right, okay. All right, any further discussion from the committee on this?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, in all due respect to Christine's, she was on this agenda as an agenda item, and would you be willing to give her the courtesy of a final rebuttal on her, if she intends to do so? I think you had a few points you wanted to make. I know public comment is public comment, but she was specific to the agenda, and I thought she wanted to make another point. And
okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that the appeal process was raised as something I missed along the process, but I did have a conversation with Dr. Whaley at one point, and I said that I felt that, you know, the way this was rolling out and all the different consequences from team to team was really creating chaos within the kids, within the kid groups, within the coaches, one to the other, that was really kind of creating a problem. And in our verbal conversation, Dr. Whaley said, well, you know, maybe I'll have a conversation with, and this is obviously all hearsay, but he said I'll have a conversation with the athletic director and maybe we can sort of revisit how this all rolled out and see what happens. That I wasn't hearing anything back. So I reached out to my son's coach again, and I said, are you aware of all of the consequences that have been given across the board to these kids? Most kids are one game. This kid has this. My son has 4. He was the kid that was at the party and the police had no issue with him except being there. So I did appeal 2 times, really. Did I go to Mr. Body? No, I did not.
I wouldn't say it was a formal.
No, it wasn't a formal appeal. Yes.
No, not back and forth.
Oh, sorry.
To the committee, please.
I did not make a formal appeal, but I was also not advised that there was an appeal process that I should have at that point taken, which I'm pretty sure Dr. Whaley could have advised me of that at that point. And I don't know how quickly an appeal process would have rolled out when you're in playoff week and you're talking about, you know, tomorrow's the game and in 2 days there's another game. And I don't want to discount the issues of substance abuse. Please don't anybody think I want to discount the issues of substance abuse and the ramifications on kids. I get that. That's never been my point. So, and I think that one piece that got slightly skipped over is, why are we really only talking about athletes? Because if this is going to be a policy in your school system, then why are we holding athletes to a different standard than the other kids involved in extracurriculars? Why is this not I can't remember what it is now. Mrs. Tupper handles it. DECA. And student council and student government and all of those things, because those kids are at parties too. Then how does that not trickle to them as well? Why are there not repercussions for them? Because, you know, as you know, situations happen, they hit the news like we talked about. There was the Dropbox issue. Did that trickle into team benching? These were all all issues that are, I mean, substance abuse is important, but so is that. And I don't know if anybody started their season in September being told, I'm sorry, you're benched 3 games because you were clearly involved in that. So in closing, I think it's a little bit, it's much more, it's not a little bit, it's a much more complicated issue than really any of us wants to deal with, but I think it's a pretty important issue. And I think some things need to be ironed out. Things are changing in society, and there's charges being thrown around for all kinds of reasons for kids. And the school department has to figure out where they stand on all that.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. So, Dr. Whaley, could you, where's Dr. Whaley? Oh, hi, sorry. Could you keep it open to club advisors as well? I don't know if we want to do that, but in terms of addressing it not just being athletics, could...
policy that we, clubs and activity, all extracurriculars should be included.
So it won't just be the athletic substance abuse policy, which I wouldn't suspect you would do that, but we'll just keep it very general in terms of all extracurricular activities.
Mr.
Any
Chair,
further discussion?
may I, at this time, I think we've discussed this quite a bit this evening, and I think that
You move the question? You move the vote?
that Mr. Allen has a motion on the floor to have a meeting with parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I really think that this being, at this particular time, it should be the administrative group, such as the superintendent, the principals, et cetera, it should be more administrative right now to talk about what's in place and bring it back to the school committee, to a school committee meeting. And I think that that's where we should go. If you're going to put together a committee, it should be administrative at this time, because they know what the policy is, and through the discussion tonight, administrators here and Dr. Pilata would be able to address those very important issues that have been raised this evening and bring it back to us.
Okay, so Donaldson.
May I amend the motion to piggyback off of what Dr. Whaley has presented us with? That we task him with the challenge of composing a committee that includes the interested parties he recommended, specifically tasked at handling those 3 primary issues. At least we have a point person. It might put, by changing that motion to make it that, I think that
Dr. Whaley will
put him as the point
appointing the
person.
committee to- okay.
What are those, I'm sorry,
To
what
include-
are the 3 specific?
One second, please, Donaldson, hold a
Okay.
second. So that Ann can get the motion accordingly. One
I
time.
make a motion that we direct the administration to establish a committee, including at least 1 parent, at least 1 member of the athletic department, member of the administration, and member of the police department should they feel compelled to join. And I think if Janet Mcclendon would be willing to serve on that as well, I think she's an asset to that team.
So you're withdrawing your initial motion or amending?
Amending the motion to be specific with those individuals added.
Personally, I'd feel more comfortable if you're going to charge Dr. Whaley with setting up this ad hoc committee to review athletic policy, then he should also be allowed to choose who he wants on the committee, not who we tell him to.
Fair enough. Ultimately, we vote on the outcome of those
Right.
decisions in that committee, so, and I have no issue with that, so.
To review specifically 3 issues.
3 issues. Consistency of discipline,
Mhm. name sharing.
The sharing of information from the police with the school department. In the last,
Curricular activity.
in the extra, there it is. Thank you. I got too many notes here, so, yes,
There's a reason I sit here.
thank you.
Just a point of clarification on the sharing of information. You heard Sergeant Lacey say that that's a policy of the police department.
Hmm.
So if they make that decision, we're gonna get the information,
Right. Exactly.
no matter
Yep.
what we have in our policy. So, just so we all understand that.
Yes, and that's perfect. That's what we're looking for, is clarity.
Okay.
I'm dealing with it.
Yes. It's a total mess. Total mess.
We'll get it right. If Ann can
I
ask you.
that we withdraw the whole initial thing and go with what you just said.
Let's do that.
So, can you both, oh my God, what is the
With-
word? Take back, withdraw.
Withdraw the
your
motion.
And then go to this one you just.
The motion we just, yes. Thank you.
I'll second that.
He didn't get a second on his first motion.
You did, Sylvia.
No.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the table. No more discussion.
No,
Let's
done.
take a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's cold.
It's cold.
Chilly in here.
You're not cold?
Yeah.
No, I'm like, oh, no. Oh, no.
A young blood.
I'm out.
Yeah.
When you
That's
get
a
older,
very
your-
tense
you get older, your blood
conversation.
thins.
Warms you up.
What's the third thing?
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, are we saving on oil or what? Or propane? Yeah, right. Right. Not till December 1st, no matter how cold it gets. Okay, moving on.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the personnel recommendations as presented to us this evening.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Dot, could you just add the one?
And the addition of Andrew Godfrey for the robotics team as a volunteer.
Perfect. Have a motion, a second, any discussion?
I'm sorry.
Discussion?
I would just like to thank our two wonderful employees, Jennifer Cohen and Polly Lamarck, for their over 30 years of service to our district. I think that should be noted in the minutes.
Perfect. So noted. She's run out of paper, though. You have to get her paper.
There you are, Pat.
Okay. So discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item, fiscal year 18 BSD budget update.
Motion to open the
Second.
fiscal year 18 Burrillville School Department budget update.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
Oh, we didn't get a vote.
Oh,
We have a
Yes,
motion.
aye.
No, we're not there yet.
oh,
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Oh,
oh.
excuse me.
You are excused. You've been working double duty.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Yes, you're ready.
I'm requesting at this time that the school committee allow me to transfer $30,000 from the salary and benefit line item to the out-of-district transportation.
Motion to approve
Second.
transfer.
Any discussion?
One question. Are we to expect that the transportation item be increasing as time goes on? I'm talking about, more people going to charter schools, et cetera.
Yes, so the So if we have students that are attending district locations that are further away, yes, it can increase, as well as if you have
Thank you.
yeah, unfortunately, yes, it will always increase.
Okay, so we did need a vote to open for discussion, because now we're voting down here on the transfer.
But,
Yes. In Robin's report, she asks for the transfer, and that's what we're voting on.
so when we come down to that, we're usually voting on this at this time, not in administrative reports, right?
No,
Right, we're
we're
voting on it
voting
this
on
time.
what she has asked for.
What she's asked for in your administrative report.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
It's right here.
It's in another, oh.
After your budget.
Right.
It's
in
also
the administrative
in Mark's.
reports.
It is in the administrative report as well.
It's both, but usually you vote on the
No.
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 Vote on it now.
Correct.
Okay.
We're all on the same page.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr.
Not
Chair.
you, Robin.
Mr. Chair, motion to open fiscal year 18 ring budget update.
Second.
Motion was second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No recommendations at this time?
Thank you. Next item.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve policy P3811.1, service animals in school policy. This is a second reading, and dispense with the reading.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item 10, superintendent's report.
Motion to open.
Second.
Motion open a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Superintendent recommends the approval of the Safety and Emergency Operations Plan for 2017-18.
So moved.
Have a motion
Second.
and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Item 11, administrative reports.
Mr. Chair, motion to receive and file with a big thank you to all administrators, staff, and students for the great educational information, art, sports, and other projects presented in all reports.
Second.
That was great, Dot. Motion and second, all in favor?
Who seconded? You?
All in favor?
Donnison.
I just have
What?
3 quick
Okay.
things, really quick. I just wanted to congratulate the high school girls soccer team on winning the state championship this Sunday. I'm sure we'll have them in within the coming months. So formally congratulate them. I also wanted to congratulate the high school unified volleyball team on making it to the state championship. We were not successful in winning that title, but that's okay.
They did good.
Still think that's wonderful. They made it that far. And lastly, thank you to the High School Student Council for inviting the committee to be a part of the 2017 homecoming festivities. I always enjoy that day. So congratulations to all the students and the faculty members who took part in any aspect of planning it. Job well done.
Excellent.
Thank you for talking fast.
I tried.
Second. Motion
Need
and
a vote.
second.
All in
yeah.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Reports of school committee subcommittees. Having none. Correspondence, communications.
I have some information.
You have information?
I've been talking, well, constituents have talked to me about certain situations. And one of them is, actually, this was a person who was a substitute, and over the weekend, 2 weeks ago, was called about 7 times to substitute in the school system. She wasn't able to because we're in Atlanta, Georgia. But I'm concerned about the shortage of subs. And what do we need to do to increase it, increase the subs?
We've done everything that we could possibly do. There's a shortage across the state. If you recall, we passed a policy, we increased the stipend. We give a larger stipend to retired teachers from Burrillville. We sent a letter to parents because RIDE now allows us to hire subs if they have a bachelor's degree. We have encouraged parents to apply who have bachelor degrees. We did get a number of parents Julie provides orientation to those parents, and they're also utilized as subs. So we've, to the extent that we have the authority to do what we can do, we've done it up to this point. Conflicting with that issue is trying to provide professional development to teachers and trying to get that done during the school day. And obviously, when we have coverage for those teachers who are being provided professional development that we know that are coming in to cover for Sylvia and or anybody else because you're going on a professional development day, we may not have a sub to cover teachers who may call in sick that day. So it presents a problem. It's an ongoing issue. We've addressed it. We've met with the union at least a couple of times to work with them. We've taken some of their suggestions. So we're doing everything that we can to address the issue.
Should we increase the pay?
Well, we've done it. We've increased it. It's getting the person. It's the body. They're just not out there. They're just not out there. I mean, to get a parent or anybody else who just has a bachelor's degree, they can be a sub. You know, we're finding that it's difficult getting those people. Never mind having a certificate.
Is it possible to get, to hire people or individuals as full-time substitutes?
Well, that's an issue for the committee to talk about.
We already have that.
We did. Yes, please.
We very recently instituted a situation where we have district-wide elementary subs. So we have a substitute, we have dedicated substitutes at each of the elementary schools who come to us every single day. And as a condition of that special employment, they agreed with us at the beginning of the year to be here for us in Burrillville every single day. And so we increased the stipend for them by $10 a day so that they get a little bit more than the day-to-day subs, but they are guaranteed to be in the district every single day. I think actually because of that, things have gotten a little bit better at the elementary schools in terms of coverage. So that's something we're starting with at the elementary level. That was a conversation with some of our union representatives. We thought it was a very good idea, and we'll be looking at the possibility of expanding it out if it continues to be successful.
Work in progress.
Work in progress. Then I have some questions about, I was given questions about the rink policies. Some constituents have talked about football players using the locker rooms in the rink, and they're not allowed to use cleats in the building, and they have to go outside and put their shoes on? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Apparently, these parents said that one child's cleats were stolen during that time. Not sure what that is or what it means.
That's hard for me to believe if they have their cleats in their hand and they're walking out to a bench on the side door and taking their cleats with them and walking in after they take their cleats off. The reason why they can't wear cleats in the building, Mr. Sampier, is because dirt and skate blades don't match. So I've asked them either to take them off out the side door or take them off in the hallway where you come into the boys' varsity room. We made the locker rooms available to the football team 8 years ago so they wouldn't have to pay for busing to come from the field house over to Callahan Field. That was one reason. Second reason was when they did have a home game, they felt as though it was a away game for them because they were on the bus. So we don't have a problem cleaning after they get done because it is a mess with the mud, what they have on their clothes. But to bring them on with their cleats and walk up and down the hallway, that's really unfair. If that's going to be the case, and some parent doesn't want the cleats to come off, I can't have them ruining people's blades. Then I'm going to say, no, I mean, my opinion, then they can't use the rink. I mean, I'm doing this, I wash their towels for them, I make sure the room's warm and clean, I do everything I can. I'm asking for one thing, don't wear your cleats in the rink.
Is it possible for them to kind of take them off within the rink somewhere?
They can come in through the side door and do it, but their complaint is the hallway is tight, and the fire department don't want me to put a bench in there because it obstructs the fire lane.
So have them come in the side door?
again, they come in the side door, but they take their cleats off. They use both the boys' varsity room, which wouldn't be a problem because they don't go into the rink area, but we have so many football players, I use both the boys' varsity and the girls' varsity, so they have to walk outside in the rink area to get there. When they do that, it's clumps of mud. Again, mud and skates don't match, especially, I mean, I don't want it done at all, but this was happening with a college game, and it was awful. And it was working out really good until 2 games ago, when some coach told a kid, you don't have to do that. Well, that's really unfair to us, because we're doing everything for these kids to help them, to give them a place to go.
Thank you. One other thing, a 50-minute session, I had a concern about that they didn't want to cut it short. What does that mean?
Say that
50-minute hour.
That was addressed way before I was there, and that's what most rinks do. You pay for the 10 minutes of the ice being made, so you get a 50-minute hour, so you schedule breaks every 50 minutes, on the hour for the 10 minutes of the ice being made. That is a policy that was put into place long before me, 20, 30 years ago.
I guess this person felt that the 50-minute hour was cut short.
The 50-minute hour is never cut.
No?
No, I don't have, that's not a, if they pay for 50 minutes, they're on 8 o'clock in the morning, they get off at 8:50. So the way it's always been.
Okay, thank you.
Sylvia, are his answers to those 2 questions acceptable to you?
Yeah,
Give
well,
to your to give to back to your
yes,
constituent?
yes.
So, as Chris and Robin and Bill and Julie and Ann know, I spend a lot of time calling them on the phone to answer these questions, so I don't have to put them on the spot on this meeting.
So I can do that.
So Chris kind of just got put on the spot a little bit. He's very animated, pretty good, good animation.
Well, if that bothers you, I'm sorry, but I mean, excuse me for 1 minute. I just would like to address that.
What do you, wait, no. You're not gonna address that. So the idea is with the committee members that we need to make as many phone calls and ask as many questions as we can before the meeting. Because simple questions get answered and people don't get put in spots. So I'm always calling. I have everybody on speed dial. I can just call, pick up the phone. It's usually a question from a constituent that I get an answer to. I email my constituent right back, and it's the end of story. So we all need to do that whenever possible, as much as possible. And that's probably what our constituents want. They don't want to wait till a meeting to get an answer, to ask a question, when you can just go right to ask the question immediately, get your answer immediately. We just need to try to do that.
You can email us too.
Email administration, email, call. I prefer to call because I like to talk to people.
Up to the ring.
Nah, I don't have that much time. Okay, so we're still under correspondence communications. The only thing I have to say is this district update, first edition. I love it. This is great. This is long overdue. This is, find it perfect. I wish I would have thought of it. Next item, new business. Approve homeschool applications.
Motion to approve as, sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Motion to approve homeschooling applications as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 16, pending issues, Levy Rink Locker Room Project. Please.
Okay, so since the last meeting, I would like to withdraw that, putting on an addition to the rink. I have looked over the rink, and I've talked to Bill about this. There are some pending issues with a few things that are gonna cost money. The compressors have become a real problem. We thought it was with the power company. The power company has upgraded everything. I had, as I told you in some of my reports, but I've had Johnson Controls come in, and it's the compressors themselves, mainly what we call #1 compressor. So that is going to cost money to replace it. I thank Bill for helping me get all the prices on the addition. I want everybody to know that. But that's a concern. To keep the doors open, a locker room's not going to keep the doors open. It's going to keep Nichols happy and sign a longer contract. But to keep the doors open, I need compressors. So I got to look into that. I also have to look into, I went up on the roof to do some fixing when we had that windstorm. And the roof over the locker rooms is porous. It's been there for well over 20 years. That's going to have to be replaced. And the boards are 11 years old. You get 15 years out of them. They're cracking in the corners, which when you guys come to graduation, when it's warm in there, you want to take a walk through, you can look at. So that's going to have to be replaced. So I don't have money to do everything. The rink doesn't have money to do everything. So the rink, in my eyes, business eyes, is to keep the rink open. These are my needs, not the addition. So the addition, I wouldn't suggest to do, knowing that I need to do these other things down the road.
Good executive decision. Appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions for Chris?
Yeah, but good. What is that? What are the implications to Nichols if they are not going to be? How many years left on that contract?
After this year, there's 2 more years left. Yeah. Again, nobody's handing us a lump sum of money, and I feel as though the obligation is for me and you all is to keep the doors of the rink open. Without compressors, there's no doors being kept open. That roof is going to be a problem. You know, that's short money compared to the compressors. And, 4 or 5 years down the road, the boards are going to have to be replaced. I'm looking at it as that new machine that we have the lease to own on will be paid off at that time, so then we can divert our money to the boards.
Good.
Very good.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions by committee members? No? Thank you.
Do we need a motion to take it off of?
Yes, we do.
Take it off.
I'll make a motion to take this off of pending issues. And Chris, I just wanted to thank you for all the hard work that you and Bill put into this. All the time and energy.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So, and we'll remove that from pending issues. Item 17.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
You got one in there.
I did.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alex, and who's the second?
Yeah. That wasn't as long as mine.
Mark, so long for short meeting.
Yeah.